this video, we are going to check out the new set 7.5 Uncharted Realms. We're going to be going over all the new traits, 24 new champions, the new augments, changes to the treasure dragon, which we'll get into later, and 2 quick item changes. But let's just get right into this because there's a lot to cover. This is going to be releasing on September 8th with patch 12.17. And PBE Access will be available, I believe, around tomorrow. If you want reference material, all of this information will be available on my website at BunnyMuffins.lol. Let's get right into the traits. We're going to start off with Darkflight. Darkflight allows you to sacrifice a unit at the start of each fight, giving an item that they're holding to each of your Darkflight champions. As you guys just saw right there, we sacrificed Zippy to give a Rage Blade to Rel, Rengar, Swain, and Aphelios. We'll be going over their abilities in the champion section. Darkflights also gain a bunch of health the more you stack the trait. One interesting thing to note is that when you put an uncraftable item on the champion, you get what's known as a Darkflight essence, and on death, this stats items are granted to each Darkflight champion. This is mainly just for items that are non-craftable. The other big trait in set 7.5 is Lagoon. Lagoon units gain bonus ability power and attack speed, and a sea stone appears on the board that grants bonus loot based on how many times Lagoon units cast abilities. Lagoon also gives ability power and attack speed that scales based on how many you have. The units are Malphite, Talia as 1 cost, Kai'Sa and Zac as 2 costs, Zeri and Seraphine as 3 costs, Nyla as a 4, and Soam as a dragon as a 7 cost. The Astral trait is new as well. After each player combat, you gain an Astral Orb. The combined star level of your Astral champions increase with the quality of the orb. Astral champions also gain bonus ability power based on how many you have. So from what I've heard, Astrals now are a little stronger, but harder to 3-star. That's the main trade-off. You now shouldn't be able to guarantee hitting Astral 3-stars every single game, but you still have a higher chance to based on the orbs after each player combat. Now let's get into the champions. Let's first take a look at all the new 1 costs we have so far. Starting with Malphite, he's a Lagoon and Bruiser, and he just gives himself a big shield based on his max health and AP for 5 seconds. Wukong's a Jade Warrior, and he is a 1-cost unit. He slams his target with a staff and deals physical damage and stuns them for 1 second. Talia is a Lagoon Mage, and she throws a Sea Stone Volley, which throws 3 Sea Stones at her target, dealing magic damage to the first enemy hit. Last up, we have Nasus, rounding out the 1-cost units, and he is a Shimmer Scale and Guardian. And his ability is Fury of the Dawn. He surrounds himself in light for 6 seconds, gaining 350 maximum health and dealing magic damage to adjacent enemies every second. As for the 2-cost units, we have quite a few new additions. First up, we have Zac, who is a Lagoon Guardian, and his ability is Unstable Current. He explodes outwards towards enemies within 2 hexes, dealing 5% of their max health as magic damage, and also heals himself. Jax is a Jade, Shimmer Scale, and Bruiser, and his ability is Counter Strike. He enters a defensive stance for 2 seconds, dodging all incoming attacks, and when the stance ends, he strikes all enemies at dealing magic damage and stunning them for 1 second. Rel is pretty interesting. She's a Darkflight Cavalier, and her ability is Iron Bond. She forms a tether between herself and her bound ally. She also grants both targets 40% of her current armor and magic resist for 5 seconds. Next up, we have Aphelios. He's also a Darkflight, but also a Cannoneer. His ability is Binding Eclipse. He uses his Infernum Cannon to blast 5 bolts in a cone towards his target, each dealing physical damage to the first enemy hit. Subsequent attacks that hits against the same enemy deal 80% less damage, and then he uses his Gravitum Cannon to stun all enemies hit for 1 second. Kai'Sa is a Lagoon Dragonmancer. Her ability is Tidal Burst. She fires 4 missiles split between her target and nearby enemies that deal 54 magic damage that increases by 2 missiles each cast up to 12. When at max missiles, each missile does 10% more damage. Lux is a new Astral Mage, and her ability is firing a star towards the furthest enemy, dealing magic damage to the first enemy and then less to the next one. Last up, we have Zyra. Zyra is a Whisper Evoker, and her ability is summoning vines in a row with the most enemies, dealing magic damage and stunning them for 1.5 seconds. Now we have our 3-cost units. Zeri is a Lagoon Cannoneer, and her ability is Water Shock. She fires a water pulse with electricity at the closest enemy within 2 hexes, otherwise the enemy that is closest to the center of the board, and the pulse explodes on contact, dealing damage, and creates a laser behind the target that also deals more damage. Next up, we have Rakan, Ragewing, Guardian, and Mystic. His ability is Disarming Diversion. Rakan will dash to the furthest enemy within his attack range, disarming all units he passes through, and taunts his target. Then, for 4 seconds, Rakan creates a shield with 200 health on himself, and his attacks grant him an additional health shield. Seraphine's next. She is a Lagoon Evoker and Mystic, and her ability is Serenade of the Sea. She sings her Serenade of the Seas, granting 240 shield and 2 mana per attack to all allies within 2 hexes for 4 seconds. Rengar's a new assassin this set. He also is Darkflight. His ability is Unseen Predator. Whenever he kills an enemy, he permanently gains 1 stack of Bone Tooth Necklace, up to 20, and each stack causes him to ignore 1 armor for each of his targets. He also leaps towards the lowest armor enemy, dealing 190 physical damage, plus a percent of his attack damage, and gaining 200% attack speed for 1 second. One of the new things they're doing this set is introducing 6-cost dragons. The first one we're going to look at is Zippy. Zippy is a guild and a dragon. Zippy's ability is Somersault Assault. Zippy shields himself for 2 seconds and somersaults towards the highest percent health enemy, dealing physical damage and knocking them back slightly. Lastly, we have Namzi. Namzi is a 6-cost unit, and it's its own unit now. Namzi is a prodigy, dragon, and mage. So you may have noticed there's a Heimerdinger hanging out here. So now, instead of trainers training the Namzi, Namzi's fully trained and hatched as a dragon now. So Namzi will now gain a random trait at the start of each game, and then summons a former trainer to aid her in battle who also gains this trait. So this game, Namzi is a mage, as we could see on the bottom, so we get Heimerdinger, but you could get Lulu if you get Evoker, and you could get Tristana if you get a Cannoneer. While we're talking about dragons, dragons do have an updated trait. You can now have more than 1 dragon on your team without being penalized. Dragons provide the same 3 of the marked trait bonus to your team, but now you get the added benefit of dragons scaling up as the game goes on. So 500 bonus health if you have 1 dragon, 20 armor and magic resistance if you have 2, bonus damage if you have 3, 1 additional team size if you have 4, and if you have 5 of them, you double the previous stat bonuses. Now for the 4-cost units. Nyla is another new assassin and also a Lagoon, and Nyla's abilities is Apotheosis. Nyla cracks her whip blade at her target, dashing through them and dealing magic damage, and if this does damage to a shield, she steals 50% of the damage she dealt to it, and if her target is shielded or killed, she instantly recasts the ability again. Pantheon's really interesting. Mortdog talks about Pantheon a lot because Pantheon's a Whisper and Warrior, and his ability is Aegis Assault. The reason why it's so interesting is because the active part of his ability, where Pantheon braces his shield for 2 seconds, doubling the effectiveness of his passive and dealing physical damage in an area in front of him over the duration. While he's doing that attack, he's stacking up Whispers really quickly, so Pantheon ends up being really strong during the course of the fight. The next champion we have is Graves. He is a Tempest and a Cannoneer, and his ability is Quick Draw. Graves' attacks spread in a cone of 4 bullets in front of him, each striking the first enemy hit for 100% of his attack damage, and his active is Grave dashes towards his target, quickly firing 2 attacks and granting himself bonus armor and magic resistance for 4 seconds. Jace is a new shapeshifter. I don't know if you guys have noticed yet, but we are getting a lot of reprints from previous sets, which I think is pretty cool because these are a lot of the more popular champions from the past. And Jace transforms into his melee form, replacing his ability with Mercury Judgment, then slams the ground around his target, dealing physical damage and knocking up enemies for 1.5 seconds in an area. While he's in his melee form, Mercury Judgment makes him leap into the air, smashing the ground, dealing more damage, and also gains a health shield per enemy hit for a couple of seconds. Now for the dragons. Dragons now cost 6, 7, and 8 gold because they're a little too expensive before. So first off, we have Soam, who is a Lagoon, Mage, and Dragon. And Soam's ability is Tide Blossom. Soam sends out a tide to an unmarked target, marking them with Tide Blossom and dealing magic damage to enemies along the way. Tide Blossom's transferred to a nearby target if the enemy dies. After 3 casts, his next cast instead summons a vortex under each Tide Blossom, dealing magic damage to enemies in the area. As you guys can see, you want to do a lot of casts, so Mage is going to be a crucial trait for Soam. The last dragon we have is Swain, the Dragon Tyrant. Swain now has transformed into a dragon. He is now also a Darkflight and no longer a Ragewing. So Swain releases his Dragon Flock, launching 8 Dragonlings towards nearby enemies that each deal magic damage to their target, and then they return to Swain and heal him for a percent of his missing health. Very similar to the legendary Swain from set 1. The only new legendary unit we have in this set is Terra. Terra is a monolith and a dragon. A monolith creates 3 hexes on the battlefield, and units standing in this hex at the start of combat gain a 20% damage reduction. So as you guys can see, these earth columns down here, you could put each of your units on them and gain that bonus. Terra's ability is Earthquake. Terra stomps the ground 3 times, causing an earthquake around them, dealing physical damage that is boosted by a combination of the armor and magic resistance plus a percent of the attack damage, and then at the end of the earthquake, Terra scales are hardened for 8 seconds, granting more armor and more magic resistance. Again, legendary dragons now cost 8 gold. Now that we know all the new champions and what they do, let's get into what's being removed. So Heimerdinger, Tristana, and Lulu are now part of the Prodigy trait with Namzi. Swain has transformed into a dragon like we talked about before. Tahm Kench, Jinx, Corki, and Sona are being removed, same with Anivia and Ornn, and then Aatrox, Taric, Ashe, Thresh, Shen, Kayn, Nami, Elise, Alawi, Ryze, Nico, Talon, and Pyke are all gone. I'm going to be missing Pyke the most, probably Talon a bit too, and Elise. Those are probably the coolest units that are being removed from the last set. I'm actually curious as to why they removed some of these. But now let's talk more about the system changes. So there's an adjustment to the Treasure Dragon. Now there are 2 more Treasure Dragons. The first one is a Chaos Treasure Dragon, and then the second one is the Radiant one. Chaos can give all sorts of rewards, big or small. Radiant gives a Radiant item along with random loot like the normal Treasure Dragon, and then the normal one still appears around 40% of the time. So it's around like a 40-30-30 split. Onto the item changes, Frozen Heart is being removed and now builds Fimbulwinter. Fimbulwinter grants 15 bonus starting mana, and once per combat at 50% health, allies within 3 hexes gain 20% max health shield that lasts up to 3 seconds. Shielded allies gain 30 armor and 30 magic resist for the rest of combat. And then for Spear of Shojin, quick adjustment there, it now grants 30 bonus ability power, but restores 3 less mana than it did before, so now it restores 5 additional mana per auto attack. Now onto the augments. So the augments for Uncharted Realms, we have like quite a few of them. We're going to group them all into one little list here. And let's go over the tier 1s first. So Lagoon Heart, your team counts as having 1 additional Lagoon unit, and you also gain a Kaisa, pretty standard there. Darkflight Heart, your team counts as having 1 additional Darkflight, gain an Aphelios. Siphon Soul, Darkflights benefit from the topmost trait of the sacrificed unit. This does not increase the trait count for that trait. Let's move into the tier 2s now. Consistency, gain double streak gold. Birthday present, gain a 2-star champion every time you level up. The champion's tier is your level -4, minimum of tier 1. That's pretty interesting, so maybe you could do like a hyper leveling strategy with this. Scope weapons, your units that start combat in the back 2 rows gain +2 attack range and 15% attack speed. After that, we have Protectors of the Cosmos. Combat starts, your team gains a 30 health shield for every item component equipped on an Astral champion, including those that are part of a full item. And then you gain a Lux for that one. This one's kind of like Scrap Shield from before. Darkflight Crest, gain a Darkflight emblem and a Rel. Dragon Imperialist, if you only have 1 dragon, dragons execute enemies they damage who are below 25% health. Gain a Namzi. Dragonmancer Conference, after combat with a player, a random Dragonmancer appears on your bench. Gain a Kaisa. And then Hero in Training, the Dragonmancer nearest to the Dragonmancer hero gains 50% of the Dragonmancer traits bonuses, and you gain a set. Lagoon Crest gives you an emblem and Zac. High Tide, until they cast 2 times, Lagoon champions have 30% reduced attack speed, but gain 12 mana per second, and then you gain a Kaisa, so that's if you want to cast a lot. Oasis, when Lagoon champions gain a shield, they remove all negative effects on themselves and heal for 20% of their missing health. Essence Theft, mages' attacks drain 8 mana from their target and gain half of the mana drained, gain a Lux. Base Camp, Scale Scorns gain 8% damage every time they start combat in the same hex, stacking up to 4 times, gain a Lilia. And then Terrify, your units take 15% less damage from enemies shrunken by Whisper champions, gain a Silas. Lucky Gloves, this is probably one of my favorite augments that I've seen so far. I actually have a replay of this that's coming out later this week, so subscribe to the channel if you have not already to check that out. Thieves Gloves will always give your champions items that they can use well. Gain a Thieves Gloves. Woodland Charm, your highest health champion is cloned. Clones cannot hold items. Scoped Weapons, your units that start combat in the back 2 rows gain infinite attack range and 25% attack speed. Wow, you could just attack across the map with this one. Part-Time Assassins, the Assassin trait grants its bonuses to your champions that start combat in the back 2 rows. This does not increase your number of assassins, and then you gain a Kayn. Darkflight Crown, gain a Darkflight emblem, a Giant Slayer, and a Rengar. That one's going to be really powerful for Rengar. Age of Dragons, if you only have dragons, every 5th attack from a dragon fires a Dragon Soul Blast that deals magic damage equal to 15% of the target's max health. Gain a Namzi, Zippy, and a random tier 4 dragon. I'm assuming they're removing Dragon Horde and Dragon Alliance to make room for this one. This one sounds pretty neat. Dragon Soul, your team counts as having 1 additional dragon, gain a Zippy. Lagoon Crown, gain a Lagoon emblem, a Spear of Shojin, and a Zeri. And then Ragewing Soul, your team counts as having 1 additional Ragewing, gain a Gwinsu's Rageblade and a Rakan. Finally, like, items that work really well with the trait. A lot of these, the free items you get, some of them are like only half good or something like that, but Gwynsu's is exactly what Ragewings want. Now I want to give my overall thoughts on the new set. So I like that they're changing dragons, because dragons before, you could only play one of them, and that's very silly because they're the new mechanic of the set, and that limit just makes it very unfun. You know, you just get one dragon, then you can't play any other one unless you get a very specific augment. So now that you can play multiple dragons, I want to see teams that are like 2 dragon, maybe even 3 dragon plus like regular traits. So now you can maybe have a Deja with Mirages, and then also add in an Itis to tank for you, or maybe add in the new Terra as one of your tanks as like a legendary upgrade. And then next thing is changing the gold of the dragons from double the gold, so they used to be 8 gold and 10 gold, down to 7 and 8 gold. That's going to make pivoting a lot easier, or like changing out your team comp, upgrading your team comp to the next dragon tier. It's going to be slightly easier than how you did it before. What I also want to see this set is having more ability power carry options. We only really had Nami, Rise, and Legendary Dragons to hold a lot of the AP items. I guess a little bit of Deja, but he used to be an attack speed carry, then he later got turned into a mage. But I want some sort of like 4 cost AP carry. It's interesting that they did not include one here. So if we look at this, Nyla is the only 4 cost that's been added, and that's an assassin. I'll get into assassins right after this. So for the new AP carries, they didn't really add too much. They have a bunch of 2-cost ones. I believe Lux, that is a new champion that can do AP carry, but she's a 2-cost unit. Jace, they have not really settled on whether he is ability power base or attack damage base. So it depends on what they actually come out with when the game releases. I hope it's ability power, because ability power has not gotten a lot of love lately. Maybe Namzi could fill that spot. Namzi's at 6 gold, which is a 3-cost. Again, it's a little weird. So we'll have to just watch that, because we just have never experienced that before. But yeah, Sohm is a 4-cost dragon, so it's going to be similar to Deja in terms of AP carry potential. So maybe Sohm can fit that role. But there's no like 4-cost Lux unit that we've seen in the past. There's no 4-cost Aura unit. I wonder why they're purposely doing that. I'll have to, maybe we could find out when the more information about the set releases. In terms of my favorite unit of the new set, I think it might bring back the good old days of Rengar. Rengar was one of my favorite champs from set 1, because back then, I don't know if it's because everyone sucked at the game, but if you get a 2-star Rengar, you could get like easy top 4s back in set 1. Maybe because he was unbalanced, maybe because people just weren't as good back then. But I'm excited to play him again. Assassins are back in the meta most likely. Hopefully Nyla's a real unit compared to Talon. Talon just really wasn't a real unit all of last set. He was always a secondary carry. So maybe Assassins could do something. Kayn also sucks, so they replaced Kayn with, I'm assuming Rengar's the replacement for that. Just having like some reroll carry for Assassins, because I don't really think they added anything else for Assassins other than those 2. But yeah, overall, like Assassins took a huge break last set. We just never really saw them like really dominate, unless you count Assassin Olaf, but I don't really count Assassin Olaf because you needed the spatula for him. I like having like the natural units be like the primary carries. In terms of my favorite new trait, definitely it's going to be Darkflight. Darkflight giving items to everyone is absolutely nuts. You could have like 4 ZZ-Rot portals, which is insane. Lagoon, I tried it out. I did like a Lux carry, so that one was pretty good too. But it's not as fun as Darkflight in my opinion. This one's a little more boring. It just gives like regular stats. Nothing wrong with that, because you always need those types of traits in the game. Monolith, so Terra, I don't know how good Terra is yet. I'm glad that they added this, because it's like a splashable dragon that fits in almost every team comp if you need a tank. So that's definitely a good upgrade, because we had Aoshin, Shyvana, and Aurelion Soul, and Aoshin and Shyvana, you can't just splash them into a random team because they're just pure damage units. But a tank is more splashable, so I do like that change there. Shyvana obviously fits the in-between role. And then Namzi being a permanent part of the game is pretty fun, because I think Namzi was the most popular unit of last set. And not in terms of like number of times played, but probably in terms of the amount that they're talked about. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the new set. Let me know your thoughts down below as well. We're going to be coming out with a lot of games, a lot of guides going into the new set, which is again in around like 2 weeks. So definitely look out for all the new information on that. But I hope you guys enjoyed this overview. I'm also doing a small giveaway on Twitter, so definitely check that out if you want free little legend eggs. But apart from all that, I will see you all later. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe, and of course smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.